at it when you're doing dry laid walls so that you have two faces. If you're doing a retaining wall, you don't really care what the alignment of the face is in the back, but you're still building a two-faced wall, if that makes sense. So learning to identify what the face of the stone is so that it has the length of its of the material going into the wall, oriented into the wall, is critical. Harding is a technical term for the material, kind of like the riprap size material that are going into the heart of the wall, into the middle of the wall. Some people will call it pinning. If you're coming from like a traditional masonry background, sometimes you'll hear the term chinking for that kind of material. It's just infill. It's not just infill. This is actually a pretty critical part, structural part of the wall. Dry laid walls are designed to be flexible, so a little bit less of an issue down here where you don't have so many freeze-thaw cycles, but certainly up in New England where you get deep frost penetration into the ground, and now it's even worse because we don't have deep ground penetration. It's like we'll get 2 feet of frost and then it'll warm up and then it'll freeze again, and so you've got a lot of movement in the material. Having this harding laid so that it's fairly level and tidy and pinning the back of the stone, even if that wall moves, it's resetting itself and still has a ton of friction on the inside. If you were working with like a masonry wall or something that has a lot of concrete and mortar in it, that's going to become a homogeneous, solid mass, and if there's any movement, that's going to create a ton of pressure in the wall where it's not being structurally supported anymore, and that's where you start seeing failures. And once you start having a failure, not much you can do other than fill it with something, compact under it, take it apart and do it again. So this is supposed to be maintainable, flexible, and the hardest part for people to wrap their heads around is how to build efficiently so that you're making money doing it. And that just comes from practice and getting really disciplined around these rules. So you'll notice like bad examples, couple of pieces of infill, stones that aren't really set very well. You've got this goofy little piece of chinking or pinning that's on the face of the stone, and if there's any movement in the wall, it's just going to squirt out the face. So we don't want anything. We'd ideally have that stone flipped over so that the piece on the inside here would actually be aligned with the face, and then maybe use that piece of pinning in the back to kind of keep everything level and the face of the stone plumb with the face of the wall. Also, don't want to fill the wall with any kind of drainage stone, clean stone, any small gravel, because that just ends up turning into ball bearings in the inside of the wall. So as things start to move, the stones will start to slip on top of it, it'll start working its way out. So try to keep the harding on the chunkier side. If you're building a wall, setting up at a new site where you don't have like a bunch of small processed stone, like you're going to start generating this stuff as you start working the material. But I generally like to have like 3.5 minus kind of not quite riprap, somewhere in between riprap and like 3.5 ballast stone available. And you just need a small amount of it to kind of get started, just to kind of prime the building, and then once you get rolling, you'll start generating it. Rule 3, crossing the joints. Anybody who's done masonry work probably already inherently does this, but you want to follow a 2/1, 1/2 process where you're breaking your joints. So we're building in courses. We're using the next course up to cap this bond joint so that we're not creating zipper joints or running bond joints all the way up through the wall, which if there is, again, any movement, there's not enough friction to hold that joint together, and it's just going to fall out like a column. So that's something to pay attention to. It can be a hard habit to break. Build to the line, we'll kind of skip that one for now, but we're not going to be building, we're building a fairly short kind of retaining wall. Just as an example, we'll probably only have 3 or 4 courses or something, I don't know, 4 or 5 courses probably. And it's also going to be curved, so we're not going to be using a string line, but generally if you're building like a straight fence or retaining wall, we would spend some more time talking about using string lines to really help get disciplined about building up and out to the line, up and out to the line, up and out to the line as you're moving up your way up the wall. And that's what's going to give you that really nice straight coursework. It's also going to help avoid the bulging that you want to try to avoid, because all of that shifts the weight of the wall and the center of mass of the stone so that it's not leaning into the wall, it's potentially leaning out of the wall and trying to pull itself out. Gravity's always working. 5 is that keep the stones level. And again, this is just because stones are going to get yanked by gravity, and so if we're laying stones that are tipping, not only is it going to get harder to have a nice clean face, but that material is going to have a ton of weight sitting on top of it, and it's just going to want to push that stone out. So it's a really quick review of those 5 rules. Most of us will learn better by doing and watching than we do by listening, and that is fair. I'm one of those. So we'll get into that a little bit more as we're laying out the space and trying to do some stone selection. Categories and what are kind of the basic tools that I could think about adding to my collection. And so, by all means, there's plenty of catalogs to go around. Feel free to grab one. Help yourself to any literature. To get into the 3 categories, the first one for us is going to be chisels and points. So these are tools that have narrow cross sections of carbide tips welded into the face, into the working end of the tool. These are going to be the workhorses for like high spot removal, getting at the base of steps in the material or at the base of a high spot on the face of the stone so that you can remove those shelves of material on the face, on the top, on the bottom, trying to get your joint work a little bit tighter. And the advantage there is that like you've got a narrow cross-section of carbide, so it's hard to put it in a position where it's going to be compromised. All the force of the hammer is going to go on the width of the carbide there, so you're putting a lot of energy into the stone. They're very productive tools for removing material and just kind of roughing stuff in. The next category for us of function are like splitting tools. So that's going to be a hand tracer. You'll notice that, like if you look from the side, it has a symmetric blade that's centered underneath the handle. It kind of looks like a chisel. That's really just for scoring and splitting. So you're going to be holding that flat on the material, generally like a third of the way in or halfway in, and moving back and forth, scoring a line until the stone snaps. There's some technique involved in that. You need to get used to reading the stone, trying to figure out the grain of the stone. So if you're not familiar with that concept, like all stone generally has a grain to it. You may not be able to see it, obviously, but generally around here you have a lot of sedimentary or like metamorphic stone that's like ledge material. So it'll have level-bedded banding in it. So it's going to really willingly delaminate horizontally. If you want to try to take advantage of those delaminations, this thing keeps coming out.
Somebody broke it.
Doesn't take me long. I think it's the wind that's like trying to filter out. Maybe. I don't know what it is.
Just do a combination of yellow and that.
We'll just blast somebody's ear whenever it picks up my voice.
Yeah.
That's alright. So those delaminations are going to be a really efficient way to split the stone. Trying to cut through something against the grain or perpendicular to the grain is going to be like try to like cutting through a stack of grain. It's going to smash your way through it. So know the limitations of the stone before you try to shape it in a way that it's naturally not going to want to shape. So there's a lot of efficiency it'll kind of pick up. the third category and like the most variety comes in with like the pitching or rock facing tools. So there's like degrees of variation. So old school traditional stonemason's pitching tool is going to be a handset. It has a square piece of carbide welded into it. It actually has two working edges of the carbide. You're holding it at a slight angle, about a 15-degree angle. So you're only making contact with that outside edge of carbide. And you're really just using that around the perimeter of the stone to try to split off the face so that you get kind of a pitch edge, what people often call it, or rock edge, or split face. In the natural kind of hardscaping community, the next variation is what we call a mason's chipper. This is by far one of the more popular hand tools that we have for this community. It's a handset that has a relatively square piece of carbide in it. It's offset to one side of the blade. And we bevel back the blade a little bit to give you a little bit more clearance on that cutting edge. So the advantage here is really when you're working with more regular stone. If you were working with a handset on a round piece of stone that you're trying to square up, as you try to hold that tool more vertically to get a better bite into the stone, you're going to start making more contact with the flat edge, and you're going to lose contact with the cutting edge of the tool. So you're not going to get as much accuracy in your cut or purchase on the stone. So to kind of compensate for that, that's why we bevel the blade back and offset it to one side. So when you're working with natural material and you need to kind of get better bite into like the cheeks of a piece of like glacial till or something like that, that's the tool for you. So versatility wise, like that's probably one of the more versatile tools that we have. If you need to add one or two, like that's a great one to have in the bag if you're just trying to clean up or trim the edge of a stone. And then what I often say is like, bigger isn't always better. It's often less productive because you don't have as much control. Narrower blades puts more energy into the stone and gives you a lot more control. Better to whittle your way back through the stone unless you know you can get away with making a clean cut with a wider blade. The other thing to keep in mind with the bigger tool is the wider the blade, the heavier the handle. Now you're talking about a 3-inch wide blade with a 1.25 steel handle. That's like a 3-pound, it's almost a 3-pound chisel. You need to be striking that with like a 4-pound hammer just to make the physics work. Otherwise, you know, your little 2-pound drilling hammer is just going to bounce off the back of it. So sticking with the lighter tools gives you a lot more control and a lot more accuracy. So around here, like we have a lot of bluestone or sandstone capstone, and there's a traditional building with like cat material that's very regular and gauge, and then needs to be split based or rock based. We make another more kind of degree of specialization in that category called a rocco, where it's an offset blade that we then pitch back on itself. The reason that we do that is because with this bluestone, especially when it's thinner on the 2-inch side, it has a tendency to want to undercut. So a lot of that comes from holding a chisel too upright or using a chisel that's too large. So if you went in with a traditional pitching tool, like a handset, sure, you can do it, but you need to have the discipline to make sure you're holding that angle just right every single time. And if you've been doing it forever and you have the muscle memory and you can do that, great, good on you. But if you're just getting into it, this kind of has that angle built into it, so you can hold the chisel a little more upright, get a better presentation on the striking head of the tool, make better contact. It just gives you a lot more control, it takes the guesswork out of it, and doesn't completely eliminate the undercuts, but it does reduce them significantly. But that's the only thing this tool does well. So if you're doing a lot of that stuff, or need to do a lot of that stuff, to work its weight in gold. If you're not, it's not going to do anything else. So maybe don't add it to the bin. That's one of those things where it's just like start off with something in those three basic categories,
okay.
And then start supplementing it with some of the more specialized stuff.
Okay.
So with that, these are the new tools.
Okay.
We're not going to be using any of those. If you want to use them, please grab them out of the leather tool bags. Those are my special toys. Don't take them, but please feel free to get your hands dirty and play around with them. Another thing that I'll mention, if you're just getting into it, one of the things that really sets us apart is the quality of the carbide steel that we use. So in most other trades, it is a huge no-no to strike two hardened steel implements together. When you make three work, it's an inherent need of the trade, and there's not many better ways to do it. So we make a category of hammers that are, we call them dual purpose hammers or buster hammers, but we make them out of a very special steel. They're hardened to the same hardness, but they're safe to strike together. So if you're having to split 4-inch, 6-inch material fairly regularly, having a pair of hammers that you can strike together adds a lot of efficiency to the work, especially for newer folks who maybe haven't developed that same proficiency and muscle memory to strike the chisel in your hand every time instead of your hand or your wrist, which is part of the game. Some of us have to hit our hands a few times during our lessons, but so those are a great way to just like invest in a couple of hammers. They're going to cover at least two of those three functions for sure. Those are the stone buster, and that one's a hammer point splitting and the points for point work. So we make a ton of different hammers, trimming hammers, all kinds of stuff, but they're really kind of specialized relative to the type of material that you're working. So don't feel like you have to go crazy getting a $250 hammer. I want you to learn the stone, learn how it's going to split before you make an investment in a hammer that you're never going to use. It's not helping anybody. So, all right. So with that, anybody else have any other questions about the tools? Then we'll probably spend most of the time talking about walling and what we want to do to the material. I need more coffee, less coffee, more donuts. So pivoting to the wall work, I'll try not to offend anybody. But generally speaking, like when you're looking at the dry lathe work, like not a lot of people who are doing it regularly are buying palletized material, and it just kind of depends on the material that's available and how expensive it is. It's certainly up by us. Like palletization just adds another layer of handling and expense to it, and generally you want to be able to go through and sort the material relative to where you want it to go in the wall, or what kind of what its role is going to be in the wall. So having a palletized just adds more material. Like you're going to have to sort it out, ideally spread it all out, and I would highly encourage, if you're getting into this stuff, it adds a lot of efficiency to the work. You spend, rather than just trying to pick stuff out of a pile and sort it through it to find the perfect stone, if you spend half a day to even a whole day doing your layout before you start laying the stone, it's going to make the walling work go so much faster, because you're already adding that bit of handling. You're registering subconsciously where you put certain things, like, and you just start to identify how to sort the stone in a way so that when you turn around, you know exactly what you're looking at. So we'll just kind of get into some of that, I guess. As I'm picking material off the wall, Anybody want to say what part's going to be the base? Anybody care? Like that one? I like that one. It's a relatively square stone. So as far as like choosing length in, that's going to be my #1 priority. This one definitely looks a little bit fatter or taller than this side. There is a little bit more length this way though. So I'll probably put that somewhere about like that or like that where I can see two faces. And then when I'm going through the pile, generally you want to have the dimensions of the wall already kind of understood. So like if you're trying to go length in, you're doing a double-sided wall, you're going to want about half the length of the wall as your target. So if you've got a 24-inch wide wall, you're looking for stones that are going to have a length somewhere around that 12-inch mark plus or minus. And then you'll be starting the course of those right next to the wall, closer to the wall, because those are going to be going into the wall first, your foundation stones, that sort of thing. And then as you progressively get taller in a taller wall situation, your wall is going to get narrower because of the batter. So then you start making cornrows further away from the wall with material that's not reaching as far into the wall. I don't know. If I'm losing anybody, if you want me to explain it in like 7 or 8 different ways, just please do. But again, this isn't like super critical in this kind of environment where we're going to be building a relatively small one. A small wall is only going to be 18 inches high. It's going to be a retaining wall. I don't really care what's on the back side of it because it's going to get buried. So again, that's another part of the sorting as you're going through the pile, identifying things that have good faces. Anything that doesn't look like it's got a good face or just kind of looking a little haggard, like this thing, it's going to go in the back of the wall, you know? It's going to serve a purpose. We can use it. We might smash it with a hammer once to see if we can like try to get a face out of it. But if not, like we're going to need harding. We're going to need material to go in the back of the wall. What I don't want to do is build a single face wall that doesn't have any support behind it, and it's going to start receiving a lot of hydrostatic pressure. Like this has got plenty of drainage stone around it, so there's going to be water going around it. But if you were doing like a flower bed or something like that, it's pretty easy to underestimate like how much hydrostatic pressure is being built up behind the wall if you've just got soil back there. Even if you've got drainage stone, like there's a lot of mass behind the wall, and it can push around, you know, an 18-inch wall pretty easily. So try to keep that stuff in mind and try to get in the habit of building double-sided walls. It's going to add a lot of length to your wall. A lot of strength. Any other questions?
So on your 24-inch wall, and you have a 24-inch stone, are you going to set that in right like that? Set that between those spaces?
Yeah, you can. Or save it. Like if you were building a taller wall, about 4 courses up, somewhere around halfway up the wall, you put 3 stones in every 3 feet. So those are generally like when you're sorting, you're trying to identify stuff that are like material that's less common. So like a bigger piece of material like that is very specific and one you know you need to use. So put those off to the side. If you're doing caps or quotes across the top of it, which is another style of finishing a wall, put all of those off to the side. Make sure you have an inventory of those, because those are high value, really important stones, and you don't want to just bury them in the wall. You know, just to kind of make the wall work productive. So, good question.
I got one for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
What about base prep and backfill for the wall?
Yep.
Concerning height, do you do any filtration fabrics? or anything like that? Any
Yeah.
filter fabrics?
Um,
The excavation for the backfill, is there any ratio to how high the wall is?
yes, and a lot of it's site specific. And so this is where I get a little bit out of my depth because I'm not doing this every day. I'm mostly just doing cool stuff every day. But I do enough of it, and I've heard the answer enough times that it's like something that's really important to keep in mind is that like this building technique is much older than all of the other systems that we're all used to working with, especially in the U.S. So the base prep, the drain stone, the drain tiling, all of that is largely informed by the engineering that goes into prepping for the systems that we've been laying over the last like 25 to 30 years. So not all of it is totally necessary. It's always a good practice, but you want to make sure you understand why you're doing it, right? So if you were just building a wall in a field, like a stone fence, you're just peeling off the top 3 inches of sod and organic material, where you're getting then down to what is considered relatively compacted soil, like earth, right? So pull that organic material off, and now you've got material that you can start laying your foundation stones on. And the idea is that if you're following the rules of this building technique, it's a flexible enough wall that is going to be sufficient. The problem with getting too exuberant with carving out underneath the wall is if you're not also thinking about where to daylight the water to, you're now just creating a bathtub underneath the wall that could then freeze or saturate the soil underneath the wall. And that's the opposite of what you want to do. Fabrics have more to do with like kind of what the submaterial is and what the filtration rate is going to be of that material. So like if you've got sandy soils, probably worth putting in some filter fabric of some sort that's going to have like a high permeability rate and keep the sand or loamy stuff from moving into the wall or into any kind of drainage stone behind the wall if you need to use it. If you're working with clay soils, generally with this building technique, you're not putting like 1.5 minus material behind the wall because that's going to start pushing into the wall and working its way in and turning into ball bearings that are like slowly moving into the wall. You want to use more like riprap-y size material on the backside.
Yeah, I don't mean to get you off topic.
No,
it's always been a point of contention of, do you filter fabric like felt fabric? Do you do bi-weave fabric, or do you not even, put a substrate in the backfill?
I would say take this with a grain of salt, but like we have a tendency to overcomplicate these things and not think about what the lifespan of these materials are and how they're going to interact with the other materials that they're in contact with. It's not a one-size-fits-all type product. They're generally engineered for very specific circumstances. So most of the guys that are doing it up by us and wanting to put that extra layer of insurance into the drainage behind like big retaining walls and that sort of thing, not only are they using heavier material behind the wall, chunkier material behind the wall, but they're using more like a road fabric that's going to have a high filtration rate, as opposed to some of the more like felty material that doesn't have a high, like a weave fabrics they're going to end up creating like a hydrostatic bubble behind the wall when they start getting clogged. So it's not the initial problem, it's when they start getting clogged up with whatever they're up against. But even felt can kind of get clogged, so it really kind of depends on the soil. Certainly, like, working with an engineer who's familiar with the soils in the area is great. Like, just picking their brain about that kind of stuff to inform you about like what you're more likely going to be running into. But at the end of the day, if you're thinking about how water's coming through that material in the back, draining down to like a drain tile and then being daylighted somewhere, like that's gonna go a long way.
The fabric's not as important as a clean stone.
The fabric's not as important as the clean stone and the scale of the clean stone. Like think about it all just trying to push its way through the wall. So, yeah, yeah, of course. The back of the wall when you're building something like this is a great place to just delete material as you're going. It's lower value stuff. So like if I'm going to a pile like this, all the little bits and bobs that have come off, like I'm just gonna start throwing those into a pile, and that's gonna be my parting pile. This stuff like it's gonna be nice maybe in the top course, or especially with like this level dented material. Round glacial till is actually really easy to build with because you can, the stakes aren't as high, like you can just kind of put it over your joints and just keep moving. And when you're building it, it doesn't look very homogeneous, the base doesn't look good, but if you're staying disciplined about staying true to your batter, or following string lines, when you're done, it looks good, and it's fast. The problem with rectilinear materials is it's always a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch off from what its neighbor is. So that raises the stake from using smaller stuff like this, but ideally you want something that's still going to reach into the wall, so that it's not just taking in the base of the wall that's going to squirt out. So that's that. So we're going to have to find some foundation stones. Working with like a little bit of a radius. So identifying material. Hey, it already has a radius on it. Paying attention to the batter of the stone. All the faces are going to have a natural batter to them. Try to get it so that it is sloped with the wall instead of the other way around, because that's going to create shadow lines in the wall. It's going to make your face look pretty irregular. I don't have any like just kind of utilitarian like S-wing brick hammers, but those are great to have around just for setting your base material. I'm assuming this has been robustly compacted. That's the other thing about drainage stone bases is this stuff is going to be pretty irregular. So like you're going to have to start disturbing and compacting each of the stones as you're building. So you don't want to be using like a plant mix or anything with fines in it, but if there is a little, like if you're building on the soil, it's easier to kind of compact around the base of the stone as you're setting it. Because like, as I'm choosing foundation stones, I'm trying to bring them to an even elevation, I'm going to have to move them up and down in the material and then compact around it. So. I'll probably, generally we're not like taking levels out and trying to set everything perfectly level. It's going to be a moving target, we're working with a natural material. And as you spend more time doing this, like you get a sense for what level is. If you're going to bring out a level and you're building a higher wall, or the project where stakes are a little bit higher, it's probably worth doing that for maybe just the foundation course to just set your two wall faces level with each other. But then you're going to be using string lines that are moving up relatively evenly with each other, and it gets a little less critical. So, kind of do a little extra compaction. Let's see. How about have some folks over here just grabbing some of the thin stuff and standing it. I like to stand it up like a bookend almost.
He wants to hold it.
Make a row of books there
Books.
for me would be great. I get through some of the thinner material.
I would hold it, man.
She gets kicked around.
Does she?
You're lucky when she gets a phone from the job site.
There's folks. Do like a little bit of everything. Some stuff over the wall.
Too many cooks.
So the foundation's great opportunity to look like very bad bottoms. So if you got stuff that has kind of weird undulations on the bottom, you're just going to bury that into the grade or into the base material, pack around it, find really efficient way to get through the material with. That's a great one. Depending on what your appetite is for getting things nice and snug, get through it into the a lot of the adjustments that I'm making, I'm not trimming like the face. I'm trying to just clean up parts of the stone that are going to be problematic and keep me from making like really clean contact with the neighbor. So I'm just squaring up the face a little bit so that everything just kind of sits a little bit more snugly together. I'm not too worried generally about gaps, as long as I can get kind of chunkier material filled in behind it. Kind of a bad example. But as we're filling in, these pieces of tinning get put in from the back, not from the front. So as long as you're putting wedge-shaped material in the back, it's not going to pull out or squirt its way out through the face of the wall. Oh, that's nice.
You want any tilt to the back or when you're laying your boards like
It doesn't need to be tilted back. If it's going to tilt in any direction, back is the way to go, but it doesn't need to be, I'd say, flat to tilted in. So if you're doing a double-faced wall, you'd want them tilted slightly in. But you will have occasions where like you're picking something up so that you're aligning the face a little bit better. Ideally, as you're going around, packing all the edges, compacting underneath the stone. You need to bring it up, add more material, pack more in, pay attention kind of to that point, Elvin, pay attention to the back of the stone. If you've got like little weird high spots in the back, those are going to pitch your stones above it forward. So better to have it tip back and pull that off first before you set the stone or before you get too far along, so that you're generally trying to think a course or two ahead of yourself. I'm notorious for making problems for future Jordan. I'm never thinking about that guy. He's real creative, he'll figure it out later. Just slow down your work real quickly. And often, you're going to be making compromises that are going to be a real headache for future Jordan. So, and if you have to make a compromise for one of those 5 rules, that's okay. Part of this is learning when and why to do that, or to get yourself out of a situation, but make sure that that's not going to create the same problem in the very next course, so that you're just compounding the compromise all the way up. That's often where you find like that running joint issue. When you're looking to make adjustments to the stone, this stuff is great. It's pretty soft. It's going to break against the grain, with the grain. It's going to release pretty willingly. It's always going to be easier to remove protrusions of stone. So look for isolated masses of material and think about what would be the most efficient way to isolate that material. So if I were trying to square up this as a face, I'm going to be scoring likely from the face. Like I'll cut from the face into the stone because I've already got like this big hunk of material that is just going to want to release pretty willingly when I put pressure on the stone from the face. As opposed to, it's also going to give me more control about what control over that line. If I tried to square it up from this side and cut down into the stone, I have a lot less control over how that splits, and it already split this way once. That's kind of a context clue that it's going to want to do something similar to that every time I try to hit it. So part of it's just learning how to like read the stone, or just think about the context clues that the stone's giving you. If you've got a flat top and a flat bottom, a lot of other flat layers in that stone, so it's going to want to do that naturally. Try not to fight the stone.
So some of you may be wondering what we've used or what this is. This is called a 2 to 4 Pocono blend. We get it out of Northeast PA. Like we said, stone sourcing is a big deal. You can get it stone from the neighbor's field. Or anything from that to California stone like this. So we typically have several of these in stock. I think it's great for little walls like this. If you're getting into large projects, then definitely you're going to want to consider where you source it and better ways to get some. What you're sitting on here, for you guys, is a PA bluestone cut from height. So they cut it and they split it to get a decent face. This new product line is not sure whether it's socket or not. I decided to try it out on here. So it has a 2-inch, a 4-inch, and a 6-inch side cut and twisted. And then the 6-inch end on the front actually goes in. So it took a little bit of shaping and trimming to get it to where it is. So the nice part is the wall back there, that's a Gillis boulder, Seneca boulder. It's come from Seneca boulder, Gillis cut. That one comes from out of well, we can get that and it's a little different. I think that's sustainable, not that. wall support. Sorry. Yeah, they come that out.
So as far as level goes, definitely a good opportunity to just kind of check that you're building a perfect wall, apparently. Because you're going to want to carry that up. Like the stakes are going to be less critical in the intermediary lifts as we move up. Definitely starting level is going to help set a good foundation, obviously. And then I'll probably, with a wall like this, like for a number of reasons, I'll start to pay more attention as I get to the last two courses, because I want that last course, since you're putting a capstone on top, I want that to be as level as possible. You can do a dry laid cap, raise the stakes quite a bit. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is if you're doing a dry laid wall, like some folks will do kind of a hybrid where they'll want to put a nice flat manufactured cap on the top, or like a fabricated top, like a piece of bluestone that's very regular. If you just mortar set that top cap to the top of the stone, if there's any settling in your wall, now you've created a bridge that's trying to hold that top layer, and eventually you are going to get that cap to snap and split. So ideally you'd want to build all the way up dry laid and then spend some pretty fucking time with really thin material getting everything set really well so that you can plop that on there and not moving. Or capping it differently, which is another option.